if they had an opportunity to gain an understanding of how other groups have done it and things that they would change, that's a wonderful opportunity to avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the mistakes that other firms have made. And so I find, interestingly enough, when I go to firms, sometimes they will say, tell me, what is so-and-so doing? And it's not like they're calling them up saying, Mr. Competitor, what did you do in your office space? That could be an awkward conversation. Whereas when we have industry topics that they can come together, they are all on the same playing field, and they talk freely about what they did, in their office space, and there's invaluable learnings in that.
Everybody benefits from attending Tenant Talks, but I would say each of our Tenant Talks are geared towards specific industries. So for example, today's Tenant Talk was geared toward the legal industry. So we had a lot of lawyers show up, and I think it's very beneficial for them to be able to speak with each other, network with each other, and just share ideas of what works in their workspaces so they can all improve.
So Aura's values are the core of the business, and essentially we take all the proceeds from all the tenant talks that we do and we donate them to different charities in Vancouver and also nationwide throughout Canada. And so with the latest, we've done Easter seals, and for the future tenant talks we will have, they will go into different organizations and benefit the community.
Tenant Talks is an awesome networking opportunity between tenants. So for example, one law firm might be interested to know the inside story on somebody that's just been through a renovation. So that's one example. But often when I go to somebody's office and they're looking forward 2 years and they're going, we got to make some big changes here. They're asking me, have you been to so-and-so's office? What are they doing? I know they just did a renovation. So an event like this is not only an awesome opportunity for education, but it's also an awesome opportunity for networking between different parties, jump in and have a conversation about what is that workspace of the future going to look like.
It was a lovely event. I learned a lot about the practical kind of lessons learned from these 3 professional firms. We can definitely take away some of these lessons to our own office and kind of challenge our norms.
I thought it was a great event, just very informative conversation from people who are going through what I think a lot of people are, if they're not going through it right now, are thinking about going through. So it's nice to hear about, how they go through the planning process, and even they were generous enough to share some of the mistakes that they made so that hopefully other people won't make those same mistakes.
An ongoing debate in all offices, whether open or closed, more traditional planning, which we call legacy planning, would be appropriate. And we find that each client is kind of unique to each situation and how they're working. So it was interesting to see them talk about the hybridization of space, because it's not really open or closed, it's where do you meet in the middle. So we got a lot out of that. So
I thought it was a really cool event, and it's really cool to see law firms which are traditionally stagnant really embracing change, really embracing the millennials and what they need. Talk of collaboration was really great. I loved how they had the hybrid working space, which kind of gives you the open space that young people crave while also keeping the partners happy with their own little spaces. So it's really cool to see people adopting it. Unfortunately, Miller Thompson didn't come in as they are fully open plan at the moment. So that would be really cool to see how that worked.
Tenant Talks is a fantastic lunch and learn series where we take different topics from different industries and sectors, and we find different subjects that companies are interested in, and then we bring all these different teams together and educate them, basically like an educational seminar on these different topics, answer any questions, and have a panel of speakers that are well educated in whatever the topic is. And then this way, they're able to, answer any questions, give their own personal experiences, their experiences both in the workplace or at home, depending on the subject.
I think the vision of Tenant Talks is that as a workplace strategist and as a design build firm in Vancouver, with many active projects across industries, we have an opportunity to be an educator and help firms avoid the pitfalls that some have fallen into through the process of workplace strategy.
So about 6 a.m. this morning, our moderator sent me a text saying that he had bad asthma and needed to bail on me. So I did a crash course on moderating this morning. So I apologize if I sound a little brand new at this. But I did turn to my lovely wife and I asked her, I said, what do we do now? We just lost our moderator and one of our panelists as well. So after a long silence, Nicola, my wife, read out a quote of Winston Churchill's, and I absolutely love it. So Winston Churchill, during one of the much darker moments in history than we're having right now, of course, he said, "It is a mistake to try to look too far ahead. The chain of destiny can only be grasped one link at a time." So I love that quote. So we're in a pretty raucous time right now with what's going on in the world and markets and the statements from the World Health Organization. We probably see that this event is probably our last for a while, but we really are thankful that for everyone that has come today. So Aura's purpose for founding these events called Tenant Talks was not for me to be a moderator or for me to stand up here and tell you why Aura is the best. But I will say that we are a leading workplace strategist, interior design firm, and construction and project management firm, doing a lot of law projects in the city currently at different stages. So at Aura, again, just why we founded these, it's our second event. We got great feedback from the first one. And it is for tenants to gain insights from persons that have had experience. And the proceeds from today, Aura is funding this, but the proceeds from your ticket is going to impact organizations in our community that positively impact the community. That's one of our purposes at Aura. So today we're giving the proceeds from this event to the Vancouver Easter Seals. So I wondered if some of our representatives from the Easter Seals could stand up. So Easter Seals is a group of charitable organizations which supports in the development and advancement of children, youth, and adults who are living with different types of disabilities. So really thankful for all that you do, and we're happy to give the proceeds of this event to you folks.
So my name is Janine Croes. I'm originally from South Africa where I qualified as a lawyer. But when I came to Canada, I changed directions a little bit, and now I am COO at Alexander Holburn. And before that, I was COO at a smaller firm, Watson Capel. And I'm here today because we went through the process at Watson, sort of down to the studs, and now we've done a smaller reno at Alexander Holburn. And it was actually a fun process. It was a lot of work, but when you see the results and you see how it changes the way that people work, that you can't hear? Okay, sure. And you see the results and you see the way it changes the way that people come to work and have a bit of a spring in their step with the renovated space. So I guess that's the passion behind it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sven Malelli. I'm the regional managing partner at McCarthy Tétrault, a national law firm that has had an office here for since I think 1960. I'm here because our firm embarked on a move. What started as a move and then became a paradigmatic shift in how we organize our office back in 2016. We had been in 777 Dunsmuir for about 25 years, and we're moving into the new building at 745 Thurlow, and initially had a very conventional office plan with the four top floors of that building kind of allocated for it. And then our CEO at the time, and I say CEO, our national CEO based in Toronto, got new religion after visiting a firm called Herbert Smith's Freehills in Melbourne, who had taken an entirely novel approach to office design with a much more open concept. And so we actually hired BVN, their Australian design team, to do a similar space with us. We lost one of our floors, or were able to shed one of our floors, and so compressed our floor space, and then went with an entirely new concept that essentially is kind of a hybrid. It's open in the sense that there are no perimeter offices, which is usually a hallmark of a professional services firm. The offices are scattered throughout. They're quite small. They're glass cubes. A lot of jokes get made about them. But they're 10 by 10 spaces with modular, very functional furniture, and then everything else is kind of open concept workstations. And again, everyone has access to the light in the open. And I think the three principles that kind of drove it were doing more with less, reducing our footprint, enhancing kind of collaboration and transparency, and increasing mobility. So in terms of technology and the ability to work anywhere around the office and frankly outside of the office. So we'll have a lot of questions that'll get to some of the harder points of that, but that's my intro.
And my name is David Pilley. I am on the practice management committee at Harper Grey. I've been there for about 30 years. About 20 years ago, I was on the design committee for a complete office renovation that we did. I am back on the design committee again because we have expanded to a new floor and we're updating all the mistakes I made 20 years ago. And I've spent the last 20 years being criticized by almost everybody in the office for my decisions, and so I thought I'd come here to allow you to criticize me as well for the decisions I'm currently making. But it is, it's a fun process. We're using Aura for our design, and we're about halfway through, maybe not quite that. It's gone smoothly so far. We've got some decisions to make, and I'm genuinely interested in what some of you folks think about what we're doing.
That's great. So just to get into some of the questions, the first one that is at top of my mind is there's many out there who suggest that the legal industry is a static industry that is less modern than other sectors, thought of being old school and stuffy, i.e. offices, remote, not having remote work policy, dress code, technology, adoption. What is your response to this?
All of that is true. We are all of those things, but we are capable of learning. And in my firm, what we've seen is it's driven largely by clients who are themselves quite innovative and some of our young people who have expectations for remote work. They have expectations for different office design. So they sort of dragged us into it. We would not have come up with any of these ideas ourselves. I would not have.
That's good. And so I don't know if, Sven, you can respond to this. Now, I know you've made quite a change. Was that part of the drive as far as how you were perceived as a sector? Well,
yeah. I mean, I think we talk about the legal industry. I mean, it's really a profession that is becoming a business and more each day. And so I think what we expect of our lawyers has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. The skill sets. But also, I think the realization that we need to look and act more like our clients, and so the way we work, the way we organize into teams, the way we focus on industries that are driven by the market outside our offices, as opposed to practice groups, which are about what we're expertised in. So we're doing a lot in that direction. I mean, I think innovation is one thing that actually is near and dear to our firm's heart. We have a national leader of innovation who's actually from Vancouver, Matthew Peters, and we've always, within the legal industry, tried to be at the leading edge. I mean, we were the first firm to go national. We were the firm to kind of implement project management in a big way because clients wanted it and they wanted cost certainty, and to give them that we're kind of trying to lead on alternative fee arrangements, and I think the space we moved to in Vancouver and the new design concept was part and parcel of kind of pushing it even more, and there were certain adjustments, but I do think that, I agree with David's point. It's a conservative industry by nature. I mean, it's risk averse and needs to be, but at the same time, every year there's an intake of fresh faces, and you see that happens. Even we've been in our office space for 4 years, and in those 4 years, I can now say that probably half the office, maybe a third of the office, maybe somewhere between a third and half of the office, have never worked in an office other than that office. And so we talk about, how are they adjusting to the office? Well, they're adjusting because it's the only office they've ever worked in. So as the march of time really helps in that way. So as long as you're committed to implementing change, humans are, I think, very poor at estimating how much they can do in a short period of time. They overestimate that, but they strongly underestimate what they can do in a long period of time. And so just letting things happen incrementally really does work.
That's good. So in today's environment of design particularly, what were the motivations in remodeling space when you came to that? Janine, I'd love to hear from you on when you embarked on that journey. What were the motivations behind that? And was it digital transformation? Was it embracing this connected generation that's coming into the workforce?
I think we had probably similar considerations to most firms. For Watson at the time, it was about a growth trajectory and expansion, but there were also things just like a general refresh that was needed. We were looking to flatten hierarchy and create efficiencies by making office sizes all the same and no big corner offices anymore. We were looking to improve communication, and we were also looking to centralize the client area so that everything was in one place and have more boardroom space, which was important for us at the time. But I think more what I'll speak to is how important that beginning phase was. And even before the design, the kind of space that you look to move to, like you say, you move buildings. And we worked actually with Robin and Matt that are sitting in the front here, and we looked at a number of buildings, and we actually decided to stay at 1075 in the end. And the reason for that was that we didn't want to go to too much of an open space. We didn't feel it worked for us. And the floor plate with the coffered ceilings worked for us to create those individual offices. So I think doing that due diligence piece in the beginning, which again we did with the brokers, was so important because it created those guiding principles that we used throughout the process. And getting it right at the start was really important. And starting that process early, we looked at this way before our lease was coming up for renewal. And so having sort of that time to really contemplate things was important.
That's good. And with today's market, the square footage that's available today is creating quite a challenge. I think we're at a vacancy rate of
less than 1.8.
It's like 3% or less.
I think it's less.
So it's pretty challenging. So tell me, how far before your actual move-in date were you working on this?
I think it was at least 3 years out, maybe even a little bit longer. And that gave us time also to look at the new space that was coming up and think about, do we want to wait and what are rates looking like? And by doing it that far in advance, we were also able to get a really great rate compared to what we would now, for sure. If we had waited, we would not have done as well.
It's interesting. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, from your perspective, the same response, Sven, how particularly two things, what the motivations were? I know you've alluded to it a little bit, but just the motivations and then how far in advance you were having those discussions and what they look like.
Well, it's interesting because we did start a long time in advance, and there were a couple other buildings on. There were about 3 options: staying put, and I think there were 1 or 2 other buildings. Like I said, actually, there was a lot of planning for where we ended up, but then the design took a kind of a big turn right in the middle of it, from a more conventional design to a new one. So I'd say the paradigm shifted at that point, and then we focused on the new space and design. And the priorities there were essentially, reducing our footprint. We ended up going from about 90,000 square feet to about 60. But interestingly, within that so much space was given up by individual lawyers who had huge offices with unused space to these 10 by 10 standardized offices that we actually had an increase of common space. And so that goes to the point about collaboration, creating more spaces for people to kind of collaborate, using the space, for instance, that normally would have been huge corner offices. In those, we have these areas that we call patios, where there's a huge table and groups will kind of informally meet to work there. And lawyers that work in offices that are adjacent to those can slide their glass doors shut if they want to kind of keep the noise out. But that was one big driver. Another big driver, once we'd committed to the space, was, well, actually, the most interesting discussion was there was a debate about perimeter offices, because it's kind of key. Once you have one perimeter office, or if you allow that and have a few perimeter offices, it kind of quickly erodes the public good that's created by not having them at all. And so there was a debate about that, and there were some holdouts, and then finally we won over that. And I think that was important, because I think the designers told us that the similar experience at the Australian firm, there were a few very senior partners that insisted on having enclosed perimeter offices like they did before. And they said in each of those cases they either moved or left the firm within a couple of years, just because it was so at odds with the culture that the rest of the space was trying to achieve, that it really bespoke that person didn't really fit and didn't want to kind of stay at the firm. But for us, I think those were the main motivations. And then the technology around the open space, we massively invested in kind of a more robust Wi-Fi environment, because of course mobility requires that, and that building allowed for it in a way that the older building didn't. So really the collaboration, the mobility factors were key.
That's good. David, you stuck with a traditional approach, as you mentioned earlier, years gone by. What was the motivation there? Were you seeing similar things that Sven's speaking about, or?
We were seeing some of them, but our primary motivation was we've just grown so much. My firm has been in the same building since I was in grade 10. And we had one floor then. And we now have gradually, over the last 2 or 3 years, taken over a 4th floor. So we had to renovate. There was no question about that. And I should tell you what we're doing. We're in the middle of that process, and we've had about 3/4 of the floor very traditional, consistent with the rest of our office. And the rest of the floor, we've decided we want to do something really cool in there, really cutting edge, because we can. We can have the rest of the office very traditional, and those people who want something really different can work in that different space. So that's what we're working towards. And then has anybody done housing renovations, renovated your house? Okay, you know the words might as well. So, we're doing the bathroom, we might as well do the kitchen, dear. So that's what we did. We're doing this 4th floor, so we might as well redo all our boardrooms on the floor where we have most of our boardrooms. And as long as we're doing that, we might as well redo our lounge upstairs. And so in addition to that 4th floor, which we had to do, we're motivated to make some changes to make the rest of the office more functional and more contemporary.
That's helpful. So back to Sven, when you're dealing with traditional partners and you've got designers that are pushing you in a totally new direction, how do you deal with that debate when you're trying to handle I'm sure there must be some fear and some, people not sure how this is going to come out. What did that debate look like?
Well, it wasn't. I think we had some very strong champions early on, and I think that made a big difference. Our CEO was obviously a huge champion. I think some of the senior leaders in our Vancouver office were on board. There were a few holdouts, but I think that battle prevailed just because the investment really required that we kind of stay true to the vision. And once people bought into that, they kind of saw that. I think what happened though, and I think some of the things we did along the way were helpful. One of the biggest things we did was we took a mock-up of that new kind of 10 by 10 office and actually plunked it right into the lobby of one of our floors at 777 for about 2 years. And it just hung around, and slowly people would kind of, it was like an exhibit that people would look and touch and go into. And I think over time, it kind of normalized the idea, so people got comfortable with the fact that this is going to be what you're working in a year or two. But the other thing was, was leveraging the fact that we were going to a new building. I mean, the nice thing about, I think it's critical that we were going to new space because we would never have been able to implement that design concept in the existing space, partly because of its footprint, partly because it would have been incredibly difficult to do kind of on a swing space basis where you do floor by floor. So we could incentivize people in other ways to embrace it by the fact that on a Friday, we literally left our office at 777, and on Monday morning, you went to a new office, you had a new computer, you had phone, everything was set up, everything had been mocked up and kind of trialed for weeks so that you knew you'd hit the ground running. We have almost zero loss of productivity. And then, of course, then the issues kind of emerged. Some people started, the biggest debate, if I say the word frosting around our office, it conjures up like a months-long debate because a lot of people were saying, because some of the offices are back-to-back, so you will be working and you will have a glass back and someone else will be working. They'll be facing kind of 180 behind you, but it's glass. And so a lot of folks were saying, can we put frosting between those and this? And I'm kind of near a thoroughfare, can we put frosting there? And that was a difficult debate. And I think in the end we kind of said, no, there's got to be a burn-in period. We've got to give it 6 months with no changes, except where there's real misses and you have to fix something because ultimately, the priority is to let people do their work, continue serving clients. But for the other stuff, we held firm on it. In the end, we did prevail and held firm on it. And so we never did put up frosting. And the key was that was one of those other tipping points, which is if you start doing it here, there, everywhere, suddenly all the benefits of the open transparency are lost. And we felt that if we'd made the investment, we should stick to it. So I think people got through that. But there were some resistance points at the theoretical stage, and then there were some resistance points once we moved and people were trying to get used to the new experience. Because the one thing about it, it's very transparent. There's a lot of visual stimulation, and it takes a while to get used to that. And so it took months for people to settle down. But now, I'd say they don't even remember it.
Did you start seeing newspaper taped up on the glass at all, or?
Well, I tried to kind of. I think any manager knows that you kind of allow some degree of self-help. That you're going to look the other way on because some people have differing degrees and tolerances for privacy, and so where people weren't acting ridiculously, we kind of looked the other way. Some people have a calendar placed up, and that's a functional thing, and no one's painted off their wall or anything, but some people have kind of tacitly put up a few things before, and we've kind of looked the other way on that because I think in any organization you have to be pragmatic too.
That's good. I was hoping that Mike was going to be here today. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He was going to join by phone, but then we thought that would be a bit awkward because he couldn't tell who he was fighting with here. But there was a debate around open plan and how to remain confidential in open plan. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Janine, because I know you talked about when you started your reno, that was all one of the key issues. How do we maintain confidentiality?
Well, I'll kind of go back a little first to what Sven spoke about and say that there's lawyers and they have strong opinions, and so there's going to be competing views. You can be sure of that. But what we did was we created, outside of doing that initial due diligence and creating those guiding principles which lay the foundation for all of our decisions, we created a very small group of basically what ended up being myself and another partner. And the partnership trusted us to make the decisions, and I think that was an important thing to do because it made the process, it made it sure that it kept on going. What we did was we communicated a lot with everybody. We let them know this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to look. If they had, any concerns, they could come back and speak to those. We'd take them into account, but there were few decision makers at the end of the day, and I think that's an important thing, especially in a law firm. I don't know if you did a similar thing. With regards to privacy, I think it goes to the kind of work that the law firm does and how much collaboration is required by the lawyers. For the firm that I was in at the time, privacy was more important. The ability to close your door and have conversations, they felt was more important for them than the collaborative piece because of the type of work they did.
It's interesting. So as the cost of real estate continues to rise and you have younger lawyers maybe living in the suburbs, how do you see remote work playing into this? I'm shifting gears a little bit here, and I'd like to talk even further. We're embarking on an interesting journey that may force remote work. And I'm curious to know from each of you how you're going to embrace that, and what What are those discussions looking like for your firm, David?
Yeah, no, we recognize that we are going to have to, in the next couple of weeks, consider remote work, maybe entirely. We've got a very good IT department that is on top of this, and next week we're going to practice. So we are going to have, probably by practice groups, certain practice groups are told, we don't want you to come in on Tuesday. We want you to try to work entirely from home, see how it works, do other practice groups on Wednesday, and then we'll figure out where the gaps are and where people are not able to communicate, and hopefully fix them by the time we actually have to do that. On a more general level, we're very open to remote work just going forward. We've got a number of people who do that now. And we've struggled with issues about security and confidentiality, but we've come through that. And for the most part, we've been very happy with the way it's worked. Again, a good IT department, and our head of IT is here today, is essential for this. If you don't have it, it doesn't work.
Yeah, so it's interesting because this pandemic, if you will, is almost forcing people to adopt it. And so there's people racing to catch up in more traditional environments. And do you think that that will carry on as far as remote work policy? Do you see that changing your requirement for footprint for your firm as it grows?
It wouldn't surprise me if those people who don't think they can work remotely in the next couple of weeks find out, sure, they can. And that might change everything. Because we do have a lot of people who say, no, I want the office, I want to come in every day, and I don't want to be working from a Starbucks or from home. They may change their minds. We may be leasing our space next year, who knows? But,
It's very interesting because we're faced with clients, a lot of firms coming to us and saying, we are growing, but we have nowhere to grow. So it is almost forcing some of these policies.
And we've had that too. We thought, when we take over a fourth floor, we're going to have lots of space. How are we going to fill all that space? Well, we'll find something. Well, in fact, we're already, even though we're taking over the fourth floor, we are very pleased when people say, I'd like to work remotely from Kelowna. That's good because we are pressed for space even now.
How does this look like for you, Janine?
I think the millennials have been working from home and wherever they want to for quite some time now, and we have a really easygoing policy with that, and we allow that as long as they meet the deadlines. They can do it from anywhere. So I think that generation will be used to it. I think my generation less so. But with regards to this, we've been spending the past week making plans, contingency plans as to what we'll do. And we have remote desktop, and I'm sure all the firms have the same thing. And so that some of the lawyers are used to working from home, but we're also going to suggest that people come in every second day so that we're mitigating the risk by having less people in the office. And we're contemplating a full shutdown if needed. So.
Interesting. So it sounds like there might be another floor available coming up in Vancouver.
Could be.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Sven, how does this look for your firm?
Well, I think like both these guys, I mean, our we've and part of the paradigm of our new space was to encourage mobility. So we've been strongly encouraging folks to work remotely when and how they can, as long as they're doing it effectively and they're able to meet their clients' needs. Where we've done it less so, but we started piloting it well before the current situation is among staff members and different categories of staff members, and we piloted some projects and those are underway. I think now we're right in the process of we're going to be, as David's firm is doing, we're going to be doing some testing about. I think where it becomes more interesting is when you've got multiple categories of people away at the same time. So we're going to be doing a trial with one of our smaller offices shortly, like in the coming weeks. The entire office offline, then a mid-sized office. Just in preparation to see, because it does place more demands on your IT infrastructure to have everyone out, and that is a possibility. So we'll look at that. But I think the back end is, I think David's right that it's going to accelerate awareness and comfort levels with mobility. It kind of has to. On the space, I don't think we'll be subleasing anytime soon. But one thing is, you notice especially in the space we have, which is so transparent, I really am reminded daily that, you know, our utilization rate is kind of between 50-60% on any given day, which is shocking, you know, but all organizations are like that. And so if you can leverage the familiarity and comfort with mobility, I think there's some potential in, you know, a small segment of the firm maybe getting comfortable with hoteling, because I know that's obviously made huge inroads with the accounting firms, but not so much with the legal firms. But I think in the future, if we face space constraints, and we'd look at that before we'd expand, kind of taking on new space.
We have that. We have hotel spaces, and mostly the younger generation uses them to pop in and out of. Okay. You can go to your next
That's
question.
important. I want to hear that.
Oh, I said we already have hotel spaces, and a lot of the younger generation use it to come in and out of the office, and they work from Cologne or elsewhere, but they still like to come in every now and then because they do need to collaborate on something.
Interesting. Yeah, as I look around this room, there's quite a few firms here that we're working with that are trying to expand, trying to grow, can't expand their walls. And so we're going through that exercise but involving the staff, it's the most important thing. So what I wanted to do was just ask you, and I think this is a good one for Sven, is what most importantly is looking back, what would you change? What would you make different about the process? Because is everyone in your firm totally pumped to be sitting in a glass fishbowl? How does that look? How did you get through that challenge?
Well, you know, as I mentioned, I mean, it's an adjustment process. I think the changes are you have to look at everyone's distinct needs, and I'm not, you know, I think not so much their personal needs and their personal views towards privacy, because ultimately you can't satisfy everyone on that front, but in terms of the functional needs of what they do. So a couple misses were the biggest category of adversely affected folks in our place were managers who went from offices to open concept. Because lawyers went from offices to small offices, but they were equal offices, and staff went from open concept without any light kind of inside the perimeter offices to open concept offices with access to light. And so it was really that small category of managers that went to open concept and lost offices. Now, that in and of itself is something that, you know, is part of the new space and the new paradigm. But in some cases, I think we got it wrong in that some functions needed a higher degree of privacy. So HR, I think, has struggled more because they have a lot more discussions that require privacy. Now, they have rooms that are frosted. Those are the one place where we put frosting. They have rooms near them and they can conduct it, but it's the way they work and the privacy around that, it's been difficult, more taxing for them. So I think a little bit more thought should have been given as to, you know, do we need to make some exceptions to allow for what people do and the functional demands of what they do. Another thing, you know, and these are getting kind of technical lawyery things, but just looking at different practice groups and what they need, like litigators typically like to have war rooms, like rooms where they can put a bunch of boxes of paper that they need constant access to. I mean, real estate is another practice that's very paper intensive. I think the business lawyers have mostly gone paperless, but real estate and litigation are very paper intensive, and so we probably could have done with more meeting rooms in and around that space. So little tweaks around there, but on the whole, I think the misses are remarkably manageable, you know, given the magnitude of the change. So I think most people are happy, and like I said, that you know, it's 4 years in, and I don't think anyone would have it any other way. I mean, some of the real benefits are lawyering, you know, being a lawyer, practicing law, it's very experiential, and you really learn by watching more senior lawyers do what they do, and what better environment than an environment that's all glass and where there's no closed doors, and you can really see other folks and meet them. And the other thing is also, you know, making our success with clients really, compared to our competitors, is really coming up with unique solutions and teams that are very engaged with the client. And that typically means having multiple practice groups, multiple people servicing the same client, whether it's corporate, tax, litigation. And it's important for those people to meet regularly. And the way our office is structured, they're constantly bumping into each other because it's an open concept. There's a central kind of coffee area. People are constantly taking the stairs. No one ever rides the elevator internally because there's only The most you'll have to do is go up 2 floors. So that's nice. The entire, the largest practice group, our business law group, is all on 1 floor. It was scattered across 4 or 5 floors at Dunsmuir. So your world was much smaller in the old place. You worked and knew 6 or 7 people that were nearby, and then you knew a bigger group, but on a monthly basis. Whereas for us, we can see almost everyone every day, theoretically.
That's great. David, when you go back to not the design that we're doing with you, okay? We don't want to talk about that in the context of this. The one you did many years ago, which is traditional, that you were referring to earlier, what would you have done differently there?
I wouldn't have done anything differently, and that's quite telling unless you realize that I think that about every single decision I make. So, but there is actually one thing I would have done differently. This time around, we decided, 20 years ago, we asked all the lawyers, what do you want to do here? This time around, we asked everybody. We asked staff. And the reaction we got was really heartening. I mean, it was the staff were really interested. They came up with some of the best ideas. The lawyers didn't contribute all that much. That was useful, but the staff really did, and I think they appreciate it. And I think we're going to have a better office now because of that input. So the only thing I would have done 20 years ago is ask the people who actually had good ideas but weren't asked.
Yeah, that was a fun exercise, actually going through that with your team.
It was, and Dan helped us with a questionnaire for our staff, and I think we got greater input from members of staff than we did from our lawyers.
That's very interesting. Janine?
I think I would have pushed especially some of the more senior lawyers to adopt more of a paperless practice. And so I think we put too much space for file storage, and considering the space downtown, and we could have made the space a lot more efficient than I think we ended up making it. And although I lied to them and I said we've got X amount of space, and they ended up actually with more storage space than they thought they had, we could have culled more, and we could have adopted just different methods of making more people paperless.
Good. So we want to get to questions for anyone that has questions in the group here, but just 2 things that I wanted to get some rapid fire response on. And so just in 20 seconds, if we could get Sven to tell us, beyond the confidentiality piece, what's your opinion of open versus closed office spaces?
I guess I'll just give a plug for open because I think it is more collaborative, and as I said, it's more transparent. And actually, on the confidentiality piece, I didn't speak about it before, but in some ways it's enhanced because you in an open space, you tend to be more paperless, or at least you're striving to be more paperless. More stuff is digital. You adopt more of a clean desk policy. So there's ways that you can actually make it enhance your overall kind of confidentiality, as long as you supplement it with, private rooms for client consultations and other special situations. But I'm a supporter based on our experience.
David?
I really like the idea. My kids do a lot of sports, which means I have hours to kill in some far-off place. And so I go to Starbucks and I work all the time. And I find I can actually get more done at a Starbucks than I can in my own office. So, with all the crowd around. And I find it's actually really, it's an excellent environment to work in. And I hope we have more and more open space.
Interesting. Janine?
I'll probably say the opposite to both of you. And I was actually looking, there's a Harvard study that was done in July of 2018, and it found that open plan offices make teams less collaborative. They found that as walls came down, so did interactions, but messaging actually went up. I actually wrote these down so I wouldn't forget. And they also found that the quantity and quality of the collaboration went down. Before we decided which way to go, we asked around. You had sort of just done it, and a couple more firms had gone open space, and so we took the time to try and find out from people. And even though it was new, and so maybe it's a different situation now, there were a lot of people who really didn't like working in that open space and found that they were trying to find those meeting rooms to have that call-in or something that they needed that privacy for, and that they found that there weren't enough of those spaces. And so for the firm that I was at the time, it was the right Hall to not have as much open space. I like the idea of what you're doing where you have that option. Again, for us, it was closed was the right way to go.
Interesting.
And I wonder if I could add something. We found something very interesting that somebody once asked, why are our students booking our meeting rooms? Because we found that they were booking our meeting rooms a lot. And we found that 2 or 3 students doing completely different things would book a meeting room so they could all be in the same place at the same time. And they liked working that way. And they found, they told us it was more productive, they could share ideas. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I suppose it's a matter of different people have different preferences. But we found that interesting.
That's very interesting. So just this last question about the young generation of lawyers and legal professionals, are they much different from your middle-aged partner, and how? If you can go ahead, David.
Well, just that they seem to want to work to in this topic, they seem to want to work together, and it's you hear a lot about lifestyle, but that's not really what we see going on. We see lawyers who are very driven, young lawyers who are very driven, but what they want to do is they want to be part of a team. We don't have a lot of solo flyers these days in our young ranks.
Sven?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, there's that aspect. I think there's also the fact that they're so much more technologically kind of savvy, so their ability to take new tools and on board and frankly to work remotely and make it work. They've just got higher prospects for success on that front and a higher comfort level. So as I said, this kind of generational march kind of helps in that regard, because I just think every year we kind of lose a generation that's less savvy and we gain one that's even more savvy.
Great. Janine?
I'd say they're looking for flexibility, and that's either with the kind of workspace that they have. Actually, interestingly enough, we found that articling students like to work together, but from the moment they become associates, a little bit less so. But they want flexibility with where they are and if they can work from home, and even just the kind of desk arrangement they have. So I'm sure the sit stand, I'm sure you're looking at all of that kind of furniture, just as much flexibility as possible.
That's really good. So is there any last thoughts that we have not discussed? Burning there to talk about. No? So is there anyone that has questions for our panelists?
If you were to look, I know we can't look into 10 years, probably not even 5 years, but if you were to say what you each think is the top disruptor in your practice in general, would that be, we're reading a lot about AI, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but what is the biggest disruptor in your industry?
Boy, that's telling in and of itself that we don't have an answer to that.
I think we're still trying to figure out whether AI, how much of an opportunity AI is and how much of a threat it is, because I think there's certain tasks that we do that AI, that we've embraced in using it, but I guess as it moves on and starts drafting documents and moves kind of up the food chain, but a lot of people think that it won't be able to do that because some of the things are innately kind of human. But every time I read an article, I suddenly realize that more and more of what was once innately human is reproducible by machine. So machine learning and AI, I think, is the biggest threat, but maybe the flip side is that there's an opportunity there. No, well, I think the example I was giving of attrition was actually the Australian firm that we modeled on. We've actually not had more attrition than we normally have. We didn't have any partners leave, so that would be the biggest form of attrition, because partners typically don't leave or don't leave often. Associates, I mean, our attrition rate, all our associates often pursue other opportunities in-house or in other non-legal kind of environments. If they were going to other firms, that's been very low and not out of step with anything before it. So that was good. And we have actually recruited partners as well as associates, but partners especially in the new space, which I think is an encouraging thing, because we were concerned about what the word on the street was, because it's not like we're still fairly unique. I know Michael and Miller Thompson, they adopted a similar plan. Theirs was a little bit more controversial, I guess, in the sense that they made half of their offices like ours and half of it open concept, but it didn't necessarily match up to the category, so they wanted half their lawyers in, half their lawyers out. And so the space, so I think they've had to manage that. That's been more interesting because they've got, you know, lawyers working alongside staff members kind of out on the open office, and it's tough because, you know, they tried to make it so there wasn't a hierarchy between the space, but I think it's been challenging for them. But otherwise, not a whole lot of folks have gone the way we have yet. But at the same time, I think when I always asked for the first few years when recruiting season came around, I wanted to kind of know what the buzz was among the law schools and the students, and I think the space was commented on almost universally, either positively or not at all, i.e. they saw it as kind of a neutral thing. I mean, it helps to have nice new space and well-designed space, and so I thank our team for that. But no, wait, I don't think it's we've regarded it as having been the cause of any kind of specific attrition.
Oh, sorry.
I think might be a quick one. Has noise been an issue in the open concept hybrid context? And if so, how do you deal with it?
You know, noise sometimes, noise is not an issue. Lack of noise is an issue because sometimes, and that's why I like the hybrid space, because I think some of the comments, Janine, you were raising about open concept kind of inhibiting collaboration, I can see that, and I think that's the full open concept because people start becoming really self-conscious about the noise that they're making. In the hybrid space, because people can kind of go in and close their doors and like you can kind of be out in the open or in fairly easily, I don't think we've had a problem. We did have, you know, we have, you know, I think we have pink noise generators kind of in the offices that generate like this really tiny kind of background noise that I don't think anyone even actually knows is on, but I was told that we had them. So I'm not sure how much of a difference they're making, but no, I think the hybrid space is key. I think if you went full open, then I think you start getting the hush factor.
Sven, your firm is the kind of most of the three of you here has changed their operation. So I'm just wondering, what's been the change? I know you came from a whole different environment to a new environment, but what is the biggest change that you describe as changed the culture of the Vancouver office?
I mean, I think it's hard to find metrics to kind of track it. I was trying to think early on, like what will we track to see if, for instance, I mean, I think we were really looking for more collaboration among our teams, and frankly, on the client side, to have teams that were, you know, more robust and included people from all different practice groups because they were kind of rubbing up against each other in this new space that was much more open. But I think the culture, you know, if I compare it to, you know, when I started at the firm, which was back in 2004, much less hierarchical. I think there's important kind of symbolism in everyone having the same types of offices. Now, lawyers being lawyers, we always find a way to kind of create hierarchy. So there are good spots to be in the building and less good spots because, of course, we're open to the four corners. So, you know, the English Bay corner has some cachet, and not surprisingly, there's some seniority that kind of grouping around that side of the building. But, you know, by and large, I think the fact that the offices are equal size has supported a much flatter, less kind of conservative and kind of top-down culture. I think our office has always had a great collaborative culture even before we went to this ship, but this has reinforced it. I also think just the fact that you see people every day and you see a lot of them is great for any organization. I think people know each other better. I think if you polled people and gave them like a Facebook and said, name as many people as you can in this firm, people's scores would be 30% higher today than they were 5 years ago.
To what extent you took into consideration social space in your design, and maybe you can briefly tell us what that looks like in your firms and how valuable you think that has been.
Sure. I think that's actually where we did make space for collaboration. We have big lunchrooms and big areas where people can congregate, and if they wanted to work on any project together, then that space was available. And again, so I think it was a little bit of a hybrid in that way. And having that kind of space is always a good thing. And people did tend to congregate more at the lunch hour. And as you said, then you get to know people, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I have to say that even with the cost of space, we have gone in our new design to a much bigger, and I mean much bigger, open area for lunch, for casual meetings, for coffee, for working. And so we value that. How it's going to work, I don't know, but ask me in a year's time.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up, and I want to thank everyone for coming today, and thank David, Sven, and Janine for agreeing to come and tell us about your experience. Thank you very much. Again, a huge thank you to everyone for coming, and we may not have another event for a little bit, but it will be stoked back up again, and we'll make sure that each of you get an opportunity because it will cover different topics. We have a lot of exciting stuff coming up and a lot of exciting speakers that are wanting to come and join as well. So again, thank you very much.
What I enjoyed about today was the comparison of the open concept with the traditional law office format. And all things being equal, you can pack more people into the open space, and it's more efficient in terms of cost effectiveness. You can pack more people in. Your construction costs are way less. But my concern was always about the privacy and the stress on people with the increased noise. And at our office, it's traditional. We've got some open concept mixed in. A lot of people are ending up wearing the Bose headphones, noise canceling headphones, so they can get their work done. So as an owner of a firm, cost-wise, you would go open concept and cheaper, more people, and office space now is so expensive, but the compromise, I think, is the stress on the employees. In our experience, it actually doesn't work. And I know at McCarthy Tétrault, one of the partners told me at their open space that one of the lawyers there has actually put a tent up inside of her office so that she can have privacy because she can't handle that glass all around her. So really interesting. Good to hear what the big firms are doing.
I think the concept around AI and machine learning and how that will change the way that offices work together would be a huge. It's a big question in my mind about our organization.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, for us, it would just be interesting to see how people, especially large companies, go about choosing the furniture, the materials they use, the coffee, the wellness compensation plans. That would be really cool to see how they're adapting to that because, again, most people are bringing in millennials, Gen Zs, and things like that. They want completely different things than previously, and then you have almost 5 generations in a workspace. How do you keep everybody happy?
Excellent.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to maybe at the next Tenant Talks event?
I don't know what the next Tenant Talks topic is, but I think it's interesting because in Vancouver we've got a multiple of issues going on with the real estate being at such a low vacancy rate. So I work in furniture, commercial furniture, so we have multiple clients looking for ways to densify and make their spaces better and more productive. So constantly looking for new ways to help them.